Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It is Friday, October 2nd, 2020, and there is nothing going on. There is no news to report. I do not know of anything I can share with you. Well, all right. We'll do a show. We might talk to Ian. He might have something wise to say about this. As a matter of fact, how about we talk to Greg Dworkin? Just a little bit, maybe, because he's a doctor and he might have heard some news that I didn't hear and I don't know anything that happened and, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it should be an exciting day. All right, God. He has coronavirus. Not Greg, not Ian. It's Donald Trump. You know this, of course. There's no way you could have missed this news yet. There's no way I'm breaking this news to you. I just, I have to, kind of go on record, like, with some sort of appropriate statement that doesn't, hope for him to die from COVID-19 or anything else or whatever. And so I guess I'm just going to say that there are very fine organisms on both sides. And leave it at that, because I think that's a fairly neutral statement, and I think I can get away with that, and it won't be held against me. I am not inherently biased toward human or virus in this situation, and I think if you just can get past the prejudices, you'll find, like I said, very fine organisms on both sides. We'll interview the coronavirus to ask how it feels about living in this crummy public housing that it's stuck in, and see what it has to say about the situation. We want to approach this fairly and objectively. However, I do need to remind everybody that, as I've been saying for some time and have been prompted to do at my wife's initial urging, there should never, doesn't matter whether it happens now, later, 20 years from now, or it turns out that Trump died in July, that time that they turned Pence's plane around and didn't tell anybody why. The point is there should be no state funeral. We don't want to pay for this guy's grand send-off, and he's done enough. And I've sent the receipts around several times for inspection, and I don't know why the whole world hasn't caught on to it yet, but now if you're going to insult troops and veterans and those who gave their lives in war as suckers and losers, if you are going to oversee the crazy Kids in Cages program and A, not care about it, or B, the other big news of the day, let Melania get herself on tape saying who effing cares about any of this stuff, that's really remarkable. I bet they are sad about their not having the blockbuster story of the morning. But, like credit where credit is due. It is coronavirus's day today. Greg Dworkin joins us just first thing in the morning just to bring us up to speed on this. Ian Reifowitz is due here today shortly. We'll give him a call and we'll have a panel discussion about this interesting news. Good morning, Greg.
Yeah, good morning. I'm not usually on Fridays, but, this happened, and I just thought it would be helpful to put some medical stuff in here, too. But in terms of the news, just in the last few hours, Mehdi Hassan writes, Hope Hicks tested positive for COVID, and then, of course, the president and First Lady did. New Yorker publishes investigation into allegations of sexual harassment by Kimberly Guilfoyle. Oh, yeah, right. Audio of Melania saying, give me a freaking break about outrage kids in cages. Yes, and then we find out that, and this is what infuriated me, the White House knew Hope Hicks was positive and basically didn't tell anybody. Yes. One report by Jonathan Limbaugh from AP says that Kayleigh McEnany knew about it. Another one says she didn't. But regardless, even if she didn't, the White House didn't tell her. So she, who has been exposed to all these people, goes out and talks to the White House correspondents and potentially infects them. Mark Meadows works with Hope Hicks. He potentially infected Amy Coney Barrett and half of the octogenarian Senate. And so, as somebody who has worked just not as a physician, but also in management, The idea that you would take these kinds of risks with your staff is just infuriating.
Yeah. Well, his staff, he went off to a high stakes fundraiser as well.
At Bedminster, where he supposedly wasn't feeling well and was fatigued.
Wah, wah. Well, these things happen. Something.
I did want to put a couple of things in here. Just, I'm not going to stay for the full hour. This is Ian's slot, but
yes,
this is a piece Neil Clancy posted, a nice little chart. At least you have, and your viewers will have it when they look at the summary later, of when you're infectious. Yeah. In other words, you get infected, and then about maybe 4 or 5 days later, you start having symptoms. And within a day or so of having symptoms is when you are most infectious. So when he goes to Bedminster and isn't feeling good, that's when he's infectious.
Hey, well, they paid top dollar.
Which is after the debate. But, the other thing, and then
thankfully.
the infectivity drops and your antibodies rise. And so that's typically the pattern that people take. Ashish Jha, who is the director of the Brown University School of Public Health, the dean, I should say, has a nice little short thread here, which puts this in perspective. The president was diagnosed with COVID-19, or SARS-CoV-2 infection, as the formal name comes up, on October 1st.
Viral boogaloo, yes.
That's yesterday. Okay, late yesterday, early this morning. First and foremost, we wish him and the First Lady a speedy recovery. We also need to sort out who else has been infected. The incubation period in the infection is 2 to 14 days, but typically it's 3 to 5. So that means, depending upon when he was tested previously, because he's supposedly tested every day, it's reasonable to assume that he was likely infected between Saturday and Monday. So there he's infected, his test's negative, but he's got virus in his body. And if he's infected over the weekend, he was infectious to others on Tuesday. And Tuesday was the debate, and he didn't wear a mask, and he was yelling.
Yes.
And his family refused to wear a mask, even though the Cleveland Clinic told them to. On the Biden side, according to the rules of the engagement, separate entrances, they didn't mix. The Biden side was wearing masks.
Sure.
And the only exposure was, however many feet they were away, with Trump yelling.
Yeah.
So Biden has, has said, wishing everybody well, and put out the word that he'll be tested today, as will Dr. Jill Biden. And what's questionable at this point is, whereas Trump is going to be isolated, you isolate people who are sick,
he's always been sick.
Biden should self-quarantine. You quarantine people who are well.
Different terminology, yes, all right.
And so the question's then, well, what about going to Grand Rapids? What about going to all these places he was going to go to? He was only reluctantly going to these places because he was worried about sending the message that you have to take this carefully, you always wear a mask, and you really don't want, public rallies. And so this happens, and I'm guessing Biden's going to cancel a lot of events and figure out, what he's doing from this point. I don't know what Trump is doing. But they're so irresponsible, it's hard to imagine they're going to do anything that's useful.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on.
You can't
on
hide in the basement. Side. Yeah. Well, that's what they have on tap for them. I mean, the letter from the physician's office, the physician to the president, says that they will be spending their isolation in the residence. And I imagine, I think...
Meaning the White House. They didn't stay at Bedminster, where he'd probably rather be so he could golf. But he's going to stay in the residence.
True. Oh, let me tell you, by the way, we better have the sheriff's officers out there at the Loudoun County line to make sure he doesn't try to come in for a round of golf in my area today. We have, I check this, every morning with my weather app. Oh, what's it like outside, and how much of the air out there that's cold or warm is full of coronavirus. They have a report, tell you how your local area is doing. First time I've seen it since the whole thing started, I guess, certainly since they were putting on the weather app. 0 cases yesterday reported in Loudoun County. I'm not having this guy come in here golfing it up and coughing all over the place and sending us back up the charts. So Loudoun County Sheriff's, just for public health's sake, I'd like to make sure that this caravan of disease doesn't come across our borders.
Right, absolutely. And, of course, everybody, every normal person, every little person, because only the little people are affected by this,
caddies
who have been affected by the virus ought to be appropriately furious at this. We all know that he was downplaying it, but the political impact of everything that he was doing and then this hitting is just incalculable at this particular point in time. And so, it's stunningly irresponsible. And, what happens at this particular point? Well, you also have to put in perspective that the reason we even know about Hope Hicks is because Jennifer Jacobs of Bloomberg broke this story.
Yeah.
Lisa Lerner,
how do we know that?
Different reporter for the New York Times and a CNN political analyst, says, and quoting the New York Times and Annie Carney, White House officials had hoped to keep the news about Ms. Hicks from becoming public to no avail. Ms. Hicks, I misspoke, from becoming public to no avail. So they wanted to hide Hope Hicks being sick.
Sure, why not?
They didn't tell us. The press told us. Yes. And then once it became known that Hope Hicks was in fact infected and traveling all over the place.
Yeah, with Trump, right? Yeah.
Hope is infectious.
On his lap.
So what happens allegedly is then we learn about, of course, Trump has to be tested, and then we learn that Trump and Melania are positive. But it's not because the White House was being transparent about this. So to add insult to injury, they did everything wrong, and then they didn't want to tell us about it.
Cool. That seems fine.
This in the middle of an election where he's trailing by 10 points and he's only got 4 weeks left, and 2 of them are now going to be, in isolation.
Okay, that seems fair to me. At this point, let me give Ian a call here and have him join in because why not?
He's been listening.
Yeah, I imagine he has been. So, well, who knows? I don't know how he spends the mornings waiting for these calls, but we'll find out.
Okay, well, stop saying bad things about him.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Soon. Okay, now I don't know whether we're going to get our ringy-dingies or not, but maybe not. Ian, are you there?
Hello.
Hello. Hi, how are you? You don't have COVID, do you?
Good morning, Ian.
Oh, I thought I heard a second voice in there. I was trying to figure out what was going
Greg
on.
Greg Dworkin is here, yes, and so is the coronavirus has joined us as well. Welcome. The virus doesn't speak, but don't breathe deeply.
I won't stay long and step on your toes. I just wanted to give a little medical update in terms of what was going on with testing and timing and such, but that's done. So you were coming, and I just thought I'd stop and say hello before I left.
Well, this is great. I'm always happy to hear your voice, and I just read a tweet of yours, I think, in the abbreviated pundit roundup, but I've already forgotten what you said, but I remember liking it.
It was great.
Oh. Well, that's a good thing.
What was it?
I think the ringy-ding started as I was just sort of absorbing it, and then, of course, my brain emptied completely because the ringy-ding is just like,
What is that? Right, yeah. That'll empty your head quick.
Well, I was just ranting at the reckless behavior of the White House, and, we do know that the debate followed strict separation protocol. We do know that they really have to call in CDC and get proper contact tracing at this point.
What do they
because
know?
Hope Hicks exposed Mark Meadows, and Mark Meadows exposed Amy Coney Barrett and all of the senators that she was escorting.
Quarantine the whole Senate.
So, quarantine for them, we would think.
Yeah.
Isolation for Hicks. But the point is, Meadows has been exposed, and even though we don't know the results of his test, you have to assume, and that's the whole point of quarantine, that through him, everybody else was, because he's been running back and forth with Nancy Pelosi and everybody else trying to put together this, COVID-19 deal.
Well, now
which
he
is
sealed
more
that
important
deal.
than ever because we have terrible job numbers today, way below expectations. And that's another story for another day. But, so that's the, welcome to the October surprise.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wasn't that fun? That was terrific. Yeah, then need to quarantine all the people who were working on the Barrett nomination, including Barrett, and delay the hearings. They can't get together and do that. They might be able to do some Zoom hearings. Maybe they can have the second debate via Zoom if we can hear Trump through his coughing.
Well, maybe next time the Trump family won't sit in the audience without any masks on.
You know what? I bet they will anyway. So,
Ian, I'm curious about your opinion about something here.
Go right ahead.
So the old saying in politics is if you have the votes, you vote. And if you're explaining why you're not having the vote at this particular time, it's just telling you you don't have the votes. So after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died and the seat became open, it became clear that the Republicans were trying to blast this nominee through as quickly as possible with an asterisk, because what does that mean? Is it before the election or after the election? Before the election, you have all the senators you need because, like, it's your party, and after the election, you might get clobbered, but they're still lame duck. So there's different incentives before and after. And Mitch McConnell, from the very beginning, said, keep your powder dry. Don't assume we're going to do anything in terms of timing. Just leave yourself wiggle room for that because we don't know. I took that to mean he didn't have the votes. And then he made a statement before all of this happened in something similar. We're not really sure it's going to happen before the election. So what did you think was going to happen, and what happens now?
First of all, let me say I really like your radio voice, Greg.
Hey.
I have a face for radio.
That is usually a very sound maxim. The only question the only thing that throws it into question this time, of course, is the fact that there are steps to the process that take X number of hours of Senate time. But if you assume, if you assume that McConnell can make Senate time go as fast as he needs to, and I don't know that, I'm not 100% sure about that. Could the Democrats somehow throw up some procedural delays to push it past the election? But if we assume that that's not the case, then, I think he's got the 51 votes that he needs, right? I mean, why would you not, if you were going to throw up a roadblock, if you're Mitt Romney or Lamar Alexander or Chuck Grassley, why would you say the things that you've said? Murkowski and Collins have said their piece, and so. The Occam's razor, the most straightforward answer is usually the right one, tells me he's got 51 votes. He can't, I guess he couldn't push it, through today. There was some reason, I guess they want to make it look like they're following some kind of reasonable procedure as opposed to, he announces Comey Barrett on a Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning she's sitting on the Supreme Court. I mean, it would be too naked. It would be too embarrassing.
But think of the politics this way. I mean, if you are a Republican senator, not Trump, who wants this tomorrow, but if you're Mitch McConnell, who wants to keep his majority, or a Republican senator running for re-election, and you're seeing how badly the whole thing is playing in the polls, you may want to keep the seat open until after the election, because if you give them the seat, why should they vote for you? They hate you anyway.
That's a great point, and I wasn't thinking about it along strategic lines. I thought you were talking about it in another way. Yeah, I mean, and
McConnell has no morals, so you have to look at everything in terms of strategy.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly that question. You hold the seat out there because you think maybe it's going to motivate some Republican voters, and although the polling does make it look bad, I would think getting the confirmation before the election would do nothing to quell the motivation of Democratic voters who are assuming it's a done deal and are angry, and will be just as angry whether it happens the day before the election or after. But it might sort of satiate the Republicans. So you could even make the polling worse by doing it before.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, you do have the fact that those special election senators would be seated relatively quickly, but not that quickly. If McConnell wanted to do it the day after or the day after that, Mark Kelly couldn't be seated yet. And if the Georgia Senate seat, which I think is Kelly Loeffler's, goes to a Democrat, I don't think that one would get seated that quickly either. Boy.
Right. It's only Mark Kelly, and the earliest he could get seated is November 30th, and it would only happen that fast because there's a Democratic Secretary of State in Arizona. Right. So you assume Loeffler is the senator, even with a special.
Yeah, McConnell can do it after the election, but before November 30th. Yeah, I mean, the only thing we could be sure of is that McConnell will do what he thinks is best to keep his majority. Although, here's another thing, though. I wonder if the one thing McConnell would do to risk his majority is get another Supreme Court justice. God, I don't know if you want to call that principled or whatever. I mean, if that's really the one thing he's there for.
Yes.
And he feels like he's going to lose the Senate majority one way or the other. But yeah, there's no reason to risk it before the election when he can do it after.
The other side of the coin is if you push it, let's say you're McConnell and you're thinking exactly that. The most important thing to me is the balance between keeping the majority and the seat. So those are the two things. And okay, let's put the getting the seat before keeping the majority for whatever reason. I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. But let's pretend it's that. If you're McConnell, you have to look at this and say, if we do this before the election, we're really going to tick things off. It's going to look like a power play. And that might even radicalize Joe Manchin. So the end result is, if I do it before the election, I push the Democrats to get rid of the Republican majority in the Senate, and I push people like Manchin to agree to change the court. So I may lose everything.
I think Manchin is equally radicalized or not radicalized, whether it happens before the election or after the election with a Trump defeat. I don't think Manchin would be less or more pushed. The only way you could push it, if you pushed it off and Republicans held the Senate majority or held somehow the White House, then I guess maybe you play that game. Maybe you play
right. Completely different discussion there.
Right. You hope to get a legitimate nomination through, which
right.
Even in lame duck, it would be legitimate if they had won.
Correct.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, to get into the mind of Mitch McConnell is a tricky thing, to say the least.
Well, I'm just thinking in terms of the mind of a voter, and I think he's like in a lose-lose position at this particular point in time. And what looked like just total disaster for Democrats after our RBG died is still terrible. And this seat is likely to happen regardless. But it's just looking and feeling different now than it did like a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, yeah, if I'm sure you guys are following the same things I'm following, which is 538. I mean, they've been hovering around 62, 63, 64% for the Democrats to win the Senate majority.
I'm looking at the fundraising too. It's phenomenal.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
and the ad spending, I think that was in today's pundit roundup. The ad spending by state for Biden versus Trump is crazy. There's just no enthusiasm.
I mean, let me mention that since you brought it up. It was in the pundit roundup. The reason we had it there is because there was a big story in NBC that they were covering spending on Biden campaign versus Trump campaign. And let's just give you some key numbers here. In Arizona, the Biden campaign spending $12 million and Trump $4.9 million. This is post-Labor Day starting September 8th. And this is on ad spending data for TV and radio. Okay, in Florida, $28.8 million for the Biden campaign, $16 million for the Trump campaign. So the Biden campaign is outspending them. In Georgia, it's only $500,000 for Biden and $4 million for Trump, and yet it's still tied. In fact, yesterday's poll suggests that Biden may even have a slight lead. In Iowa, Biden spending $800,000, smaller market, doesn't cost as much. Trump spending zero.
Hey.
I was ready for that one because that was the one that jumped out at me when I read it. Zero.
Yeah. So if you're wondering how come Iowa's looking better for Biden than you thought, that's part of the reason. Turns out Brad Parscale may have stole all the money and they really are broke. In Michigan, $12 million for Biden and $3.7 million for Trump. In Minnesota, $5.4 million for Biden, $1.9 million for Trump. Trump keeps going to Minnesota. He's not winning Minnesota. That's just crazy stuff.
He's trying to get their
similar numbers
up.
for Nevada, double the amount of money for Biden in North Carolina, triple the amount of money in Ohio for Biden. In Pennsylvania, just to give you an idea of how key the Biden campaign sees it, $20.7 million in spending for Biden and $4.6 million for Trump. That's pretty outrageous in terms of the ratio.
And remember, 4 years ago, that Trump said that he was a different kind of candidate because he didn't need to raise money because he was going to spend his own money. He didn't really spend very much of his own money last time. I'm sure.
We now know he doesn't have it. He owes it to Russia.
Exactly. He's raising money from fat cats just like every other Republican, and now nobody wants to give him any because he wants to throw good money after bad.
Right. And to continue and finish the list, and I'll leave the most intriguing one for last. Wisconsin is $9.4 million for Biden and $2.3 for Trump. So again, he's outspending Trump in Wisconsin, and by the way, winning according to all the polls. And then there's Texas. Only $37,800 spent by Biden, zero spent by Trump. Now, Texas is huge. It's enormous. It's really expensive. It's like trying to run a campaign in California or New York. And so you're not going to spend the money unless you have it and unless you have an actual plan. And it looks like both campaigns are kind of coasting in Texas.
Which makes sense, because if Biden wins Texas, it's a 400 electoral college vote landslide, and same thing for Trump. There's a point at which who cares if you win or lose Texas? The point is to win the presidency, and Texas is so far away from the tipping point. I mean, even Iowa and Georgia. I mean, if Biden wins Iowa and Georgia, it's already a landslide. But and maybe the point, I guess, of Texas is you could throw a drop in the bucket and have no impact, or you can blow $1 million and still have relatively no impact. So why blow the $1 million? Use the $1 million in places like Iowa or a place where there's more bang for your buck.
Right. And then if you want to, again, be strategic and throw this in the mix, you look at Georgia, which has Senate races, reason to throw money. But then again, you look at Texas and Georgia with Republican governors who just flat out cheat. The latest being that the governor of Texas is making no drop boxes, and you basically have to drive cross country in order to vote.
Yeah.
So how much money do you want to spend in a close race where if it's really close, the governor's going to steal it?
Right. I saw that yesterday. One drop box per county, whereas Harris County is supposed to have 11. So you're forcing them to shut down 91% of their drop boxes.
Right.
If you want to look at it that way. And we
Right.
know about
I'm
Georgia.
exaggerating. Harris County is where Houston is. I mean, it's the size of New England.
Yeah, that's right. Have one. Okay, folks in Maine, drive down to Boston or Hartford.
Right. Well, that's it for me. I'm going to get off and give Ian the time slot that I stole from him. But thanks so much. It was really fun talking to you. And I'll be back for my regular slot on Monday.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. I'm not coming back. I'm done for the day. I'll see you later. Ian, you take it from here.
You got it.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to Kagro in the Morning on the Netroots Radio. Now, what am I saying here? I'm so flustered by the president's having coronavirus. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning show on Netroots Radio. That's where we are. You know how it's supposed to go. What a day, huh? It's been so exciting that you got to tune in and hear that sort of flub. So there you go. That's my entire loss of composure over the news. I have Worldometers open to see the live updates, and I'm hoping that maybe they'll add like one to the total or in red or something that stands out. I want to know which one was him. I don't know if they've reported the president or whether he's the one that's going to put us over $7.5 million, 7.5 million cases. Trump probably thinks of it in terms of dollars. He gets money for everybody who gets coronavirus, and that's why he's so excited about the whole thing. So many other stories, too, although, honestly, this just blows them all out of the water. And, right, what about, as we discussed just briefly during the break, what about debates? I saw so much speculation that this was, well, first of all, I guess I should put out there, lots of discussion among fans of the show and others who recognize that there really is nothing in the world, the basic fact, there's nothing in the world that Trump and his team won't lie about. So, I mean, people are spending the evening speculating over, well, what about the possibility that he's lying about having coronavirus? So no one could really think of any good reasons why you would do something like that. The only thing I could even come close to remotely is he might he might have in his head the idea that if I lie about having coronavirus and then I don't die from it and then announce my recovery, I'll be able to say, you see, it's nothing. Just like I told you, I've got great genes. It was a day or two of sniffles and you should all, but still, I think that nets him nothing because that's what he's been saying all along anyway. And it's not working with most people. So I don't know. I can't tell you that I really believe that he hasn't got it. And by rights, he should have had it months ago. He's been risking it for far too long. So, I don't know. The only real mystery for me is who's the vector that carried into the White House. The timing of the leak about Hope Hicks was interesting. But now, in light of everybody wondering about whether or not he really is lying about having it, I wonder whether or not the leak happened so that everyone's natural conclusion would be that Hope Hicks was the vector and they blame her instead of blaming Trump for bringing it into his own White House and giving it to Hope. I don't know. Mark Sumner seems to think that that it was Trump was our White House patient zero. I mean, all you can do is guess at this point, but it's as good a guess as any as I can see it. If there's any weird, dark machinations that I think could truly be possible, it might be that we absolutely have to play the president as the innocent victim of somebody else's mistake here, not his own. Do you think his ego could bear it if it were any other way?
He does like to be the center of attention. Wow.
Well,
I mean, look, if we were going to be Trumpy, we would just say, lots of people are saying.
Right. Sure, we can.
Lots of people are.
Many are saying. A lot of people don't know this.
We got a little bit of news here back from Greg saying that Ronna McDaniel is now testing positive, and she was positive. She's just telling us now, but she was positive on Wednesday.
All right. So like Hope Hicks, positive on Wednesday, by Wednesday afternoon.
Wednesday afternoon, right. They said Hope Hicks was negative Wednesday morning, which is why she was allowed to get on Air Force One, which actually does suggest that, I mean, I don't have the science, Greg does, obviously. If she was negative Wednesday morning, allowed to get on Air Force One, positive Wednesday afternoon, doesn't that suggest she caught it on Air Force One?
I don't know. I don't know how quickly it worked. I think it would take a couple of days. It feels to me like I've heard Greg say that maybe it would be, you can test too early and not catch it.
So in other words, she probably more likely she would have tested negative, but actually had it Wednesday morning.
Right.
Okay, that makes
Ronna
more
McDaniel
sense.
too. All right. Congratulations. I don't know what to say to you.
To be a wide-ranging conspiracy of a lot of positive tests for this to all be. Although I guess he could have taken advantage of other people around him getting positive tests and then said "me too" or hashtag "me too." But yeah, he's not smart enough.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess I also saw circulating last night some very, very interesting and otherwise, under normal circumstances, very convincing thoughts about that might confirm the reality of it. National security types, noting for the record, and I didn't know that you could check this online, but apparently you can. The tweet most circulated was that of Tim Hogan, who I don't really know why he would have special privileges in making this call or not, but he tweeted this out. There is an E-6B Mercury. It's an aircraft, airborne command center, essentially. Looking glass, they call it, I think, in the military. But E-6B Mercury off the coast near D.C. I looked because I would expect them to pop up if he tests positive. It's a message to the small group of adversaries with, as he puts it, SLBMs and ICBMs. You'll recognize ICBM, obviously. SLBM is submarine-launched ballistic missiles, by the way. But yeah, essentially what he's saying is, I think it's real because there's an early detection and airborne nuclear command center in flight off of the East Coast, and that's something that we would do to signal to nuclear-armed adversaries that, yes, the news is out that the president has been stricken with a potentially fatal illness, but we're ready and you can't launch a sneak attack on us. Now that struck me as, well, okay, that sounds really cool and Tom Clancy-ish. That might convince me that the thing is real. But it struck me, I think I was more convinced that it was real because of that, not because of that Tom Clancy detail, but because there's no way that if Trump was faking it, he or his team would have remembered the detail of putting looking glass in the air to give the international impression that there really was a reason to think the president might be incapacitated. I doubt he would. I don't think he knows what it is, or he certainly wouldn't remember it. That's something we need to do to fool the Russians. So that's my best case for it being real, I guess. Although I am not positive in my own. I'm going way back now to my own sort of nuclear operations training. I think looking glass may be in constant flight somewhere anyway, just so that there isn't any point at which nuclear armed adversaries would think we weren't ready, no matter what's happening. But I'm not positive that's still the case. Budget cuts may have affected things over the last 30 years. So anyway, I just thought I would throw in that sort of Tom Clancy thing. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and didn't realize that anybody in the world could figure out whether the airborne command center was flying and where it was at any given time. That feels like a bad idea, but maybe we're supposed to be signaling that sort of thing.
So I think that's some sound logic you've got there.
I don't know if there was any involved at all, but it felt that way. And because it had, numbers and letters and dashes in it, it sounded really good. Plus, I got to remember what all my military and nuclear operations acronyms like SLBMs and ICBMs. Although I always learned about them as cruise missiles were all the rage when I learned this. So people used to talk about them that way. And military loves to sound out their acronyms. So they used to say Alcum, Glickum, and Slickums. Air, ground, and sea-launched cruise missiles. CMs, not BMs. Well, anyway, there you go. That's the extent of my military knowledge. I'm not going to start singing the Major General song either, because I don't have that kind of voice. All right. I just had to clear the plate of that one. And also wanted to, though, point out that there was somebody else published a quick list and grabbed a screenshot of it from television of who else had flown and been in close proximity with Hope Hicks at the time, which, here it's on Lawrence O'Donnell's program. They put it up on the air on MSNBC last night, which feels like a good way to hang this all on Hope Hicks, even if it's not true, but some list. Donald Trump and Melania Trump, of course. Jim Jordan flew to the debate with this group as well. Did not fly back with them, but that'd be great to net Jim Jordan in there too. Alice Marie Johnson, whose name does not ring a bell for me. Do you know?
I think she's the woman that Trump pardoned
yeah.
Because of Kim Kardashian and her urging.
That could be. So I guess she just decided to join in on the flight. Is she from Ohio, maybe? I don't know. Robert O'Brien, also on the flight, National Security Advisor. Rudy Giuliani. I mean, it's a jackpot. Mark Meadows, Ivanka and Jared. Don Jr., who also did not fly back. Number 11 on the list is Kim Guilfoyle, who didn't she actually get infected at some point at one of the rallies, and she and Donald Jr. said they were going to drive back home or something? I don't know.
That sounds familiar.
So who knows? She was on the flight. Now, it doesn't say that she didn't fly back, but it does say that Don Jr. didn't. So they split up for whatever reason, and Kim flew back. She's in the news, too. Maybe he was mad about that, because that involved apparently some allegations of her sexually harassing her staff while at Fox, including exposing herself to them for whatever reason, and maybe Don felt bad about that. Eric Trump on both flights, Lara Trump, Tiffany on both flights as well. Another name I don't recognize, Derek Lyons. I'll have to look it up. But
I didn't recognize Tiffany.
Yeah.
Sorry. But I'm bummed.
That's good. I like that one. Bill Stapien, campaign manager now. Jason Miller, who everybody hates, and terrific to have him on the flight as well. Kayleigh McEnany, Gabby Hurt, another name I don't recognize. Dan Scavino, and Stephen Miller. It's like, honestly, if you ask me to draw up a list of, well, if you knew you could drop a coronavirus bomb in the middle of a room and you had a list of 21 people, who would you pack in there with Hope Hicks? That'd be my list, I think. Probably missing one or two, but what a night.
Oh, what a night.
No kidding. Oh, yeah, I was doing a lot of singing last night. My mind went to Venus, so because I changed the line a little bit. I was singing, he's got it. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Yeah, baby, he's got it. But I couldn't come up with any other lyrics, and I left it at that. And then
that qualifies for our men of a certain age cultural reference.
Yeah,
for
right.
The day.
Exactly. So on to I don't know. There's certainly other aspects of this. You're certainly welcome to. You can free form it all day long with this. We've stolen your whole segment. There were other topics that ordinarily we would have had on tap to cover, and I am perfectly fine making the shift if you like, covering your latest or teasing what might be coming up for the weekend before we run out of time here.
Well, no, I don't. I don't have anything in the works yet. This week I had been focused on writing, pre-debate and then a post-debate.
Yes.
And so I think I'm going to let some things gestate over the weekend. I did write something though that we could talk about a bit, which is certainly still fresh, which is the fact that, and it's a relatively straightforward point, but if you notice that Trump and the Republicans out on the campaign trail are not talking about the single piece of significant legislation that they passed when they had control of both houses, and that's of course the rich man's tax cut, which polls poorly and has helped almost nobody outside of the top maybe 10% of households in any more than throwing breadcrumbs at them, and this goes to one of the things that you and I have talked about before, which is that Republicans campaign on and make a lot of noise even while governing about scary black and or brown people.
Yes.
But what they actually spend their political capital on is sending money up the economic ladder to the people who they really care about, which is and the issues that they really care about, which is not even really the preservation of white identity or the safety of the suburbs, but making rich people richer. And so that's their mission. The fact that that he never or barely, if ever, talks about the tax cut, and it tells you what you need to know. And if you're a voter out there, you have to realize that when they scream about Antifa or low-income housing in the suburbs or MS-13 or any of these other things, all they're trying to do is get your blood boiling so that you don't notice the fact that he did nothing for you economically. And in fact, what he did with the government that he had control of was cut taxes on millionaires and billionaires and sink us further into debt with not even spending the money on good things, on productive things like roads or education, but simply on padding the incomes of people. I was going to say like himself, but we don't even. It doesn't even look like that's like it. Yeah, but he still got some money. So that's the key. He can't, and they don't. Republicans defend the things they actually do. They have to distract voters by talking about things that are going to make their blood boil, and that's how Republicans consistently play middle and working class white voters, play them for fools, race baiting, hate mongering, and then never really doing anything for them, for their wallets, for their pocketbooks, to help their family's bottom line. Because the only people they're really interested in helping are people who are making more than $1 million or more than $2 million a year, or who have millions of dollars socked away in their estates, which is why they're always worried about estate taxes. Yes. Oh my God, don't get me started on that. But and that was what I wrote about, and I believe, according to the numbers, that post was the most whatevered post on the day it went live on the site. So,
one of the most shared, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, congratulations.
So that was nice. I don't know how they figured that out, but one of the wizards of the editorial folks let me know with that, so I was pleased about
nice. It. All right. Well, it ought to be widely shared. It's certainly a good point, and you didn't hear much about it in the debates, and and that's the reason. Well, one reason, of course, being that while they lie about their record all the time, the objective fact of the matter is they really didn't accomplish much of anything. It was very record low numbers of substantive legislation. This, despite the fact that the president spends his time, of course, on the on the road insisting that he had record high numbers of substantive legislation. So you know what the real answer is. He says it's record high. The answer is it's record low. And the one thing he's got, nobody likes it. And the transfer of wealth that you point out, it's amazing that it doesn't, stay in mind for people who are instead distracted by cultural grievances. I guess now that I think about it, when you mentioned how much wealth is transferred up the chain, I suppose you could say Trump has done more to establish low-income housing in the suburbs than anybody, except you're now the low-income housing. You bought the house for a lot of money. You thought it was ritzy, but now you're low-income. And not that the rich people are going to snap up your land for a golf course and then throw you out, but, take a look around and take a look at your finances. And if you lost your job due to the pandemic he was ignoring, it'll be a lot clearer to you. You're the low-income folks in the neighborhood now.
Right, and look at the jobs numbers that Greg mentioned. It's a story for another day, but it's also we could talk about it a little bit. I mean, this jobs report it's not good given what we're talking about in terms of a post-pandemic or a post-lockdown supposed recovery. Right, I mean, we saw 661,000 jobs created in September. And that is a significant slowdown, right? I mean, we lost 20, 30 million jobs in the spring. They added, the positive job number in June was 4.8 million, 1.8 million July, 1.5 million August, and now it's down to 661,000 in September. So that pace of job creation is slowing significantly. And it's apparently at this pace, it'll take us years to get back to where we were just in February of 2020. The U.S. economy right now is still down 10.7 million jobs from where it was in February. That is a disaster. It's a disaster. And by the way, the census accounted for about 250,000 of those new jobs created in September. And those, of course, are temporary jobs. Long-term unemployment is now had a significant uptick in this recent jobs report. We got 7.3 million workers who are unemployed for at least 15 weeks and 2.4 million who are unemployed for 27 weeks or longer. This is not good. This is not a snapback recovery. And the fact is, Congress, well, I shouldn't, I'm sorry, I fell into one of my own traps. The Republicans in Congress are not doing what they need to do. They're not passing the necessary stimulus package and not passing, they're, ignoring Nancy Pelosi. Maybe Mnuchin gets, something done just because Trump tells him, I'm so desperate, do something, anything. Maybe he thinks it'll help him for the election. If that gets help to the American people, fine. I want help American people need to get the help that they need. We need money for schools. We need money for, to help the unemployed. We need money for cities and states who are bleeding red funds, because if they don't have any money, then they're going to have to lay off more people. We need another round of stimulus checks to get people to continue to spend money. We have interest rates at a record low level, so now is the time for the government to spend and borrow that money. Would it have been better if Trump hadn't passed those ridiculous tax cuts for millionaires? Yeah, absolutely. And if Biden feels like, Biden's got undoing those Trump tax cuts as part of his plan, and he should, both because we need that money, and second because we've got an economy dominated by the people at the top, and that's not good for the long-term stability of the economy. You look at the levels of inequality reaching where they did in 1929, you got the crash. You have economic inequality reaching where it did in 2007, 2008, you got the crash. It's not healthy for an economy to be that level of an hourglass. You need a strong middle class. You need, the kinds of policies that Joe Biden is talking about are policies that are going to lead to that more a better spread in terms of a result, and moving away from that real narrow hourglass.
Yeah. All right. Well, pardon me. I'm just still got one eye on the news and the Twitter feed. I suppose some good news, I guess, for the Trump family out of this one, and I don't think anybody would dispute that it's good news. They've tested Barron Trump, and he's negative. So,
that's good.
I think everybody still hopes that doesn't happen. So, yeah. Say what you will about the rest of the kids who've been more active in politics and who are adults. But, okay. Well, we have that news, and I guess that's all you can say, because that's all you're allowed to say, if anything, about Barron. You're not really supposed to even acknowledge that he exists or something, or you get in trouble with the rabid right wing when they suddenly find, what looks like morals about things and start screaming that you're talking about a teenager. But good. Keep it that way. And that's it. Moving on from there. Wow. I don't know. It's been really interesting watching. I kind of have to get back to my mind keeps going back to the story, and I don't think I'll ever escape it. And I don't think anybody expected that I would, quite honestly. But I've been watching, and maybe this is something we might want to discuss, the weird intersection of this crazy news and respectability politics, and the question of whether, I think it was even posited by some of the pundits early on in the news cycle, will Joe Biden, out of a sense of fair play, suspend his campaign during Trump's illness? And I mean, people were furious with the suggestion, but only on my Twitter feed. I'm wondering, is the rest of the country, I don't know. I get the feeling that most people will look at this and say, bad luck for you. But I don't know if there are points to be had from this or not. But there's certainly a middle ground where Trump or Biden can say, look, I've been approaching this campaign with care all along. I've only been doing what's safe. He hasn't. That's sidelined him. That's that. I mean, I don't know what do you think the American public's sense of fair play falls on this?
Well, the answer is that, Trump should have been suspending his unsafe activities all along. He got an unfair advantage by taking risks and by doing things he shouldn't have been doing. So it came back to bite him. Yeah. Tough tillies.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I feel about it. And in fact, I was motivated to dig up and find one of my favorite pictures of the good folks at the Trump rally. I once knew their names too. The good folks at the I don't know when this rally was, but it might have been during the 2016 campaign, even with their F Your Feelings T-shirts. And that's, I guess, the appropriate response for a lot of us to people who say, come on, there's a human involved in this, and you don't want this to happen. You don't want to wish it on anybody. And the decent thing to do is, and you're joking about it is so horrible. And I thought all of you liberals loved empathy. Yeah, but it's hard to have. It's one of the flip sides of empathy is it's hard to find it for people who make a political career of not having any and denying it to millions of people. That it should come home to roost for you should be no surprise, and you even have a T-shirt for it. So I'd give some of those out. Yeah.
Why would Biden suspend his campaign when I just got a message about this that Trump Pence people are fundraising off the positive tests. The Trump Pence campaign just sent out a letter announcing that they've. Here, this is even better. Let me read it to you. President Trump and the First Lady has tested positive. they have tested positive.
Has they?
By the way, that's how the house elves talk in Harry Potter. That aside, President Trump, the First Lady, has tested positive for the China virus. That has everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Right?
They're taking it seriously.
Will be difficult, blah, 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 blah. President Trump would like to ask a favor. Will you please donate to help him recover from this disease? It is only fair since he has sacrificed millions of dollars to serve as your president. This can't be. Is this really real?
I guess so. That's kind of what I would predict for. I'm surprised he doesn't have a GoFundMe for his recovery. I mean, I guess that's kind of what it is. But he's not that cheesy, right? I need money personally to pay for tissues. I don't know what I need, but yeah. Oh, and by the way, free healthcare. Just thought I'd throw that in there, right? Free government-funded health care for the president, some of the best care available anywhere, in exchange for his whopping $750 in taxes. It's a pretty sweet deal. No wonder he wants to stay in it. If you're 75, the prospect of free health care, let's say for life, if you declare yourself dictator, got to seem like a pretty decent thing, pretty decent deal, especially if you're personally bankrupt as well. Don't forget that.
I just love the idea that they're saying, will you please donate to help him recover from his disease?
Nothing cheers him up like money.
Right. I mean, exactly. I mean, that's the only thing that makes him feel better.
Right. Laughter is the best medicine.
And he sacrificed millions of dollars to serve as your president. I mean, this just maybe this isn't real. Do they really do this? Do they not have anybody working at this campaign who has a freaking brain?
I don't know.
Maybe I got taken in, but boy, it looks real.
I you know what? They do these sorts of things all the time, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I suppose we'll hold that out there as a possible fake. And I guess if the backlash is strong enough, they would denounce it as a fake. But if it causes money to land in their accounts, I guess it's just fine. Does it have links to the? I mean, I guess you could just fake that up too. That's not. Yeah. Obviously. Yeah. So, I guess the real question is, if it's fake, will they be returning any of the money that they generate from this fundraising, or will they be keeping it? And I guess that'll answer the question about whether it's fake or not. So
it's so bad. It's that's why it's brilliant, because you can't put it past them to produce something this bad. I think the sacrifice thing it's so shameful.
It's a common theme for him, and I mean, he is insisting on the idea that he has given up so much. Of course, they would stick with it. It seems like consistent with their messaging already. We're coming up to our next break, and I don't know what your schedule is. Maybe you need to stay in your bunker to avoid getting COVID from the president or anybody else. But if you'd like, please do hang on for the other side of the break, and we'll talk a bit more.
You got it.
All right, terrific. We'll be right back.
I'll do a relatively quick sign off after the break.
Sure. All right, that's fine. We'll. Oh, as a matter of fact, how about if we do that now? Because I forget that we're talking about a 1-minute break here. And welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show and the behind-the-scenes Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just trying to figure out how to approach the rest of this ridiculous day, and we'll just do it this way. We'll sum things up with Ian here, and certainly if there's anything else. That if you can think of anything substantive to say, please, now would be the time to help us out with the rest of the show. Not that your contributions haven't been substantive. I'm looking for one. So if you had one in mind that you no longer have time to present to us, I'll take it as a big assist. But if not, it's pocket time after this.
Oh, gosh. Well, look.
There may be nothing else.
We've got, I think, some karma working here. Political karma. Not about health, but the fact is that when you mess with Mother Nature and you mess with science,
okay,
yes. You're not going to be helping yourself politically. At the end of the day, facts matter. And when you run a campaign and a White House and, frankly, a life on pretending that facts don't matter and putting out lies and condemning those people who tell the truth, it is karma when it comes back to bite your presidency. And then health is a separate issue. But this is a president who deserves to lose in the worst possible way. And he is revealed by this positive COVID test reveals the bankruptcy, as if we already didn't know, maybe for a few more million people who didn't know. It reveals the bankruptcy of his approach to knowledge and facts and governance. So let's hope it opens some more eyes and we get the election results that we deserve, which would be something like 60-40. I'm thinking LBJ Goldwater numbers
I would love
are the kind of repudiation that we need, maybe more. to smack the Republican Party, such as it is, in the face and force it to recognize that if it wants to participate in American governance in a meaningful way going forward, it's going to have to expel not just Trumpism, but the Southern strategy and the wedge issues and all of the crap that it's been spewing, going back at least to Nixon in '68, and in many ways even in some ways even before that, if you want to look at Goldwater. Although no, I don't want to go too deep into the weeds there, but they need to expunge that crap and expel some of those elements from their party, and maybe break that party into two, or figure out some way. But we need a period where the Republican Party just sort of goes into exile and figures out what it wants to believe in and comes back to us when it wants to be a reasonable center-right party, and not the insanity that gave us Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly they're due for it, and I would love to see it happen. And even among people expressing their initial unguarded reactions to the news late at night here on the East Coast, in particular, last night, said there was an awful lot of, I do honestly hope, lots of people said, honestly hope he recovers, because I would like him healthy for the shellacking he should be getting in the election. And I want him to see what the results are. And there's certainly a part of me that feels that way too. It's been incredible. And although maybe this is just the best topper for it, let him be sick and suffer his way into it and recover and see the loss. Although I imagine there's nothing he can do to control how he justifies things in his own head. He'll just blame it on the illness. I would have won if I had been at full strength or something like that. But it seems like he's headed for an epic loss, I believe. Oh, we didn't even get a chance to have Greg tell us about what seems, for all intents and purposes, like an outlier poll. But I think we saw the differential between the two hit 13 points, a 13-point lead posted in a poll yesterday for Biden. And I don't recall ever seeing anything like that in the modern political era for me. Anyway, I guess not since going back to when I would have been, before I was born, 64. Do you see something like that?
About the CNBC Change Research poll nationally?
That may be it. Yeah, I couldn't attribute it, but that's how many 13s could there be?
There have been some bad numbers for him recently, quite a few. 538's national average for Trump, for Biden, which was down to a lead of around 7.0, is back up to 8.2 in only a couple of days. It's a big move in a couple of days. Look, nothing is over until it's over, and the results can be manipulated. We if there's enough voter suppression, and we've got the fact that the in-person voting on the day of the election is still likely to favor Trump, so he's going to try to push on the news cycle. But there's just no question that the numbers don't look good for him, and we've got to put the pedal to the metal and stay on it and push as hard as we can, because we need this victory to happen. And if it does happen, we need it to be as big as possible, because we need to scoop up as many Senate seats as we can. I want Alaska. I want South Carolina. I want Cornyn in Texas. I want all these guys, as many as possible, out. I want both of those Georgia Senate seats. I want to have as big a majority as possible for Joe Biden, a repudiation of Trumpism as big as possible, because we have some serious problems in this country that need fixing. And it requires Democratic majorities to be able to do it, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. So, let's work our tails off for it.
All right, we deserve it. We need to give it to ourselves. Nobody's going to hand it to us, that's for sure. They're going to be working to affect the opposite result. But yeah, I'd love to see it, and that's the only thing that seems fair and just to me after something like this. Not that I wouldn't always like to see it go that way, but this time in particular. And we're going to need a larger margin and enough cushion so that we don't find ourselves having to work our way around holdouts like Joe Manchin, and hopefully a nationwide sweep like that changes the minds of people like Joe Manchin and say, I think I maybe have misread the national mood and the mood even in my state, after all. And that's a good way of doing it. We may be stuck with him for a while, but we can make his holdout irrelevant if there is one, or we could change his mind about the wisdom of such a holdout when it comes time to make some changes next time around. I'm in agreement with you there, Ian, and it's a good way to wind things up, I think.
Sure.
Always nice to land on the same page. Thank you for sticking around for an extended segment and for sharing your segment with this news and with Greg. And I don't know, things will probably be back to normal next week.
Right. Well,
what else can happen?
Me on. It's always a pleasure. And if I may, folks can find my book, The Tribalization of Politics, How Rush Limbaugh's Race-Baiting Rhetoric on the Obama Presidency Paved the Way for Trump. It's available in all kinds of forms that you can, find online. Hopefully you can find it through independent booksellers. If not, there's always Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. And look for me on Daily Kos. I'll be back there soon enough. Yes. And I look forward to talking with you again next Friday. All
right. Well, yes, and we'll see. I'm trying to imagine what sort of black swan events can happen between now and I think we've kind of hit the peak of things that are within the realm of our imaginations anyway. So I guess maybe alien visitation by next week. Read up on it. So we'll talk about it then. All right. Terrific. Thanks again. And thanks for your patience in dealing with this crazy day, Ian. We'll talk to you again soon.
Take care, David.
Take care. Okay. Let's see. How do you follow that up? Let's figure it out. All right. Let's see. There's certainly a couple of stories that I put away in pocket. You know what I can do? I can build off of Ian's mention of Amazon, because they had an interesting appearance in the news yesterday, too. And I think I did tuck it away. Yeah, I had a few mentions of it. They put out an interesting press release that caught a lot of attention. I happen to have the Hills right up on it because I have the Hills right up on everything because they are so aggressive in pushing their material on Twitter. And I allow them to do it by following them, but that's because they're such great straight men. Anyway, here's the news drawn from Amazon's press release. Amazon says over 19,000 workers tested positive for COVID-19. Trump does not work there, of course. He got it independently. And that's, I don't know. So that's not part of the story. But this one really struck me as a very interesting story because I think like most people, the initial reaction is, oh my God, 19,000. That's crazy. And then, of course, we began thinking, and as I announced that news here, and I said, is that bad? Is that a lot? I don't even know. I was talking about it at home, and my wife was looking up, well, how many employees does Amazon have? We're constantly having to normalize our numbers and figure out, well, what would be their rate per million since we put it that way all the time? And how many employees do they actually have? And as it turns out, Amazon does count their employees in the millions, 1.3 million between Amazon and their acquisition, Whole Foods, the marketplaces, supermarkets. Do they call themselves supermarkets anymore? Is that an archaic term now? Anyway, Whole Foods. 19,000 Amazon workers have contracted COVID-19 during the length of the pandemic. That's not a comment on how many of them have it now. I don't know how many have it now, but this is the first time apparently that Amazon has publicly shared its case numbers. And people have been calling for some transparency in that for a while, and I think just largely because they're one of America's biggest employers, apparently, 1.3 million on their payroll, and we're all thinking about them because it's Amazon and delivery services of all kinds that have gotten us through this pandemic and our isolation at home and quarantines and just basically staying out of public circulation and not doing as much shopping. And when the stores were closed, certainly Amazon was a lifeline. But it was clear to us that the people who were making it possible, well, it was clear to us, I guess I should say, us, that the people who were making it possible to survive in this pandemic were putting themselves at incredible risk. And I'm thinking about the conditions of the workplace. These enormous indoor, obviously, warehouses where people are packed in and they're working at a pretty brisk pace too. I mean, that's a really nice way of putting it. They push their warehouse pickers hard, and they're always, measuring their productivity and clocking them. And I mean, you hear horror stories about people saying, you're not allowed to take bathroom breaks. You're allowed, but it essentially ends up, it means anytime you spend in the bathroom is time you're not spending fulfilling orders, and they're watching you versus other employees on how many orders you're filling per hour. And you'll get, you essentially get docked, or you'll get let go if you're one of the lower in productivity workers. So it's super cutthroat, and it's also a place where, you can't really afford to be taking sick time off from work because it puts your job in jeopardy, and, lots of labor practices that are horrific in some ways, but I think certainly would contribute to the spread of the disease in their workplaces. And so it probably would come as little surprise to you that 19,000 such workers could find themselves positive for the disease. But on the other hand, out of 1.3 million, what kind of rate is that? And also, by the way, my wife pointing out, you can't really compare it like to where you're used to seeing this rate in the lists we get from Worldometers about countries. Like, you could just run the math and say, well, 19,000 out of 1.3 million is, is X rate. It's about what 18. It's almost a million there. So, the math does itself. It comes out to about like 18,000 per million, which then if you, make the gigantic leap of saying, well, if Amazon was a country, that means they would be, in this place in the chart. And there are countries of fewer than 1.3 million. So it's not completely out of place, but they're very small countries. But also, she was pointing out, all right, well, you're talking about an all adult population there. No children who, despite the fact that they do contract coronavirus, still apparently contract it, or at least exhibit symptoms at lower rates. So it's kind of a difficult comparison to make. But what we were able to glean out of it was this: though they're jammed into these warehouses and working extraordinarily long hours under, difficult circumstances, and working hard and moving at a pace that would probably have your respiration rate up, et cetera, they are, I think, fairly strict in their masking requirements in the warehouses. So I guess maybe a better comparison, if we could pull the numbers, would be how do they fare versus the meat packing industry, for instance, which also, requires, you can't really miss much work. It's long hours. It's in some cases arduous work in close proximity to others. Maybe the warehouse pickers aren't necessarily always in close proximity to the same people for extended period of time because they're moving around, but moving near and past one another all the time. But they are masked, and if you calculate it out, as the company did in the press release, they point out that 19,816 positive tests means that the rate of infection among employees was, as they claim, 42% lower than expected. What's expected? The rate of disease in the general population. Right now, as things stand, according to Worldometers, the United States total cases per million are 22,625. They're going at something closer to 18,000 per million. That is shorthand. The math also, converts to 2.25, well, now 2.26% of the United States population has come down with the virus, whereas 1.8% or so of the workforce at Amazon, the greater umbrella of Amazon. So they are doing better. And it's fair to say then that, well, what if the rest of us were under the same strict masking requirements? They're working pretty hard. They're indoors. They're in close proximity to one another, and the work is fairly strenuous. All things that are supposed to exacerbate the transmission of the virus. And the fact is that the virus is being transmitted in this atmosphere at a lower rate than it is among the general public, where there is no masking requirement. It may be the case then that what we're looking at is we really could be getting back to work. We really could be getting back to restaurants at full capacity and everything else if there was universal masking. The problem with restaurants, of course, is you got to take the mask off in order to eat. So we haven't solved that problem yet, but you could certainly pack people in greater density and expect a lower result than we're getting by doing nothing. And I guess one of the things we're not seeing at Amazon is rallies against masks and insistence among the workers that they simply won't wear them and it's their constitutional right not to. It's the compliance that's pretty good. And let's see. Oh, yeah. So my wife was just handing me a note here. So the 2.25% infection rate in the total American population, it would include the kids, among whom there's allegedly still less circulation. I think we figured out that in Googling that about 500,000 pediatric cases in the country. So we're 7.5 million total in the country. So 7 million out of the 7.5 million are adult cases. So what the math was that among adults in the United States, adults only, not X-rated like adults only, but, just people above 18, right? There's actually closer to 3.3% infection rate among all adults in the United States and 1.8% among the all adult population of Amazon workers. So it's getting a lot closer. I guess that was supposed to account for the 42% better rate. Whatever the actual differential is, it seems substantial enough to once again point to the, effectiveness of masking and all this. I wouldn't recommend necessarily that we open things back up full blast right away, but I know we can't do that as long as there are masking holdouts out there. It's not going to work together. Let's see, Ballerina X with this comment. Amazon warehouse outbreaks are third in the number of infections in Salt Lake County at 66 people so far. I think there was also another anomaly listed in, I don't know whether it was this article or somebody else's report on the release, and it was. Now, I haven't been able to, I didn't put the second report aside the same way as I did with the Hill, but somebody mentioned that in the Amazon warehouse facility outside of Minneapolis, I believe, they were running infection at higher than the general, the local general population there. So it's not a universal thing, and it's still thousands of people with the virus and that wouldn't have it if they weren't working there. But then if they weren't working there, we'd all really be stuck. There'd be no way to get, all of these things shipped to us that have made the quarantine period tolerable, or in some cases survivable. But certainly, I don't know, to me, it does at least offer up some evidence that a fully compliant, masked workforce with other mitigating factors in there, too, by the way. Amazon has been, obviously, they're going to be do their best to promote how much they've done to try to further mitigate the transmission of the virus, cleaning and sterilizing of facilities, and of course the masking requirements and distancing requirements, etc. And I'm sure somewhere they have a spreadsheet that will tell you just how much they think they're losing from requiring their employees stay 6 feet apart. I'm sure they've figured it out to like the third decimal point. It's still dangerous work, no doubt about it, and we ought to be aware of that and aware of what we're asking people to do to keep us comfortable and or alive during the pandemic. But I don't know. It seems to me like it's pretty clear evidence for the idea that masking could have cut our infection rate in half, but hasn't, because idiot who now has coronavirus has been running around insisting that it wasn't necessary or it might have been a hoax all along. It's really another incredible example of the opportunity we wasted here. All right, let's see. Other news playing one off of this thing. There was something I thought might be an interesting follow-up to that, and yes, right. I wanted to read through Mark Sumner's piece on this about the possible vector before our break, and then then we'll make another shift after our third and final break. Hope Hicks, he wrote, was not the vector. He's, I think, guessing, and I'll tell you why. Not the vector for bringing COVID-19 into the White House. It was Donald Trump. I love saying so. I just don't know if I have anything that can hold it together the way Mark does, so we'll borrow his. Though early concerns, about the availability of protective gear for hospital workers caused medical advisors to caution against ordinary people buying up the few available masks. By late March, the CDC had already informed the White House that routine wearing of masks by everyone was necessary to reduce the spread of coronavirus. This tells you a little bit something about the inelasticity of Donald Trump's brain. Honestly, here he keeps complaining. They said no masks, and then they said yes masks. That's not really that complex to explain it. You either have to be willfully insisting on not getting it, or you have to be a really just inflexible thinker. And, well, it could be anything with Trump. Anyway, by late March, they'd already informed the White House that routine wearing of masks was necessary to reduce the spread of the coronavirus. At his very next public appearance, Donald Trump talked about masks and immediately said that he was not going to wear one. From that day all the way to the debate, Trump has scoffed at wearing masks. Even when the White House guidelines were most stringent, Trump decided to give himself an exception. And since Trump didn't wear masks, other White House officials reported that they also felt pressured not to wear masks. That effect could be seen at countless events over the last 9 months as Trump's team marched on and off Air Force One or through the halls of the White House with very few masks in sight. And we can even add that he was visiting places where they were manufacturing masks and where the masks could potentially be spoiled. And in fact, I think did have to get thrown out because he was visiting without a mask. And he was visiting hospitals without a mask. Eventually, I think they got him to put on a mask when he visited one or another of the hospitals. Just side note here from the debate the other night, I should point out, as we have mentioned that the Trump family refused the masking requirements at the debate. And I really don't know why they put up with it, but people don't want to fight with the first family for whatever reason. But I'll throw in there, the first family members did first tweet out or Instagram out a photo of themselves all masked. As I saw, I think Ivanka and Tiffany and Melania and Lara Trump, all there with their masks on and, posing for the camera and holding up their fake gang signs and peace signs and what have you. And, but tweeting it out so as to give the impression that they were in compliance with it. And then once the photo was out, off came the masks, and then we saw them on television without masks. Why did they do it that way? I don't know. But anyway, side note to all this. Since Trump didn't wear masks, and other White House officials also felt pressured not to, right? Let's see. It was absolutely visible on Saturday when Trump's introduction of Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett was a mask-free affair. Trump's resistance to wearing a mask was absolutely on display at the debate Tuesday night, where he made fun of Joe Biden for following CDC guidelines. And we all remember how he did that, saying, oh, you know, every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away, and he shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. Nobody ever compares sizes of masks. It's not anything that happens, but he makes it up because, you know, that's his best playground taunt. The biggest mask I've ever seen. Totally ridiculous. Anyway, right now, everyone at the Trump White House seems to be making a big assumption that Hope Hicks was the vector by which COVID-19 entered their ranks. In truth, Hicks was just the first of Trump's staff to test positive. That doesn't mean she was the first to acquire the disease. The fact that both Donald Trump and Melania Trump tested positive immediately following Hicks's test results suggests that this was nothing more than an artifact of when people were tested. We'll continue on with this after the break and then shift some gears, getting ready for the weekend. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the show, and well, you know what show it is, so let's just continue on. Why waste any time telling you what you're already listening to? You're stuck here with me, and so I'll read you the rest of Mark Sumner's piece here on his guess that Hope Hicks wasn't actually the vector bringing the COVID-19 into the White House. As we left off before the break, the fact that both Donald and Melania tested positive immediately following Hicks's test results. And I don't know whether the timeline has changed any since he wrote this. But as I recall, we might have seen her positive results leaked, and then an initial test for the Trumps that came back negative, and then another test later the same day that came back positive. So that might throw a wrench into the works here. But let's see. It suggests that this was nothing more than an artifact of when people were tested. Of course, he takes up, that's assuming that rumors that Hicks had already received a positive test result before everyone bundled onto a plane Wednesday are untrue. And I think the latest timeline is negative on the plane, comes down with symptoms, tests again, positive for Hope. But if they are true, if it is true that she actually had a positive result before getting on the test, well, then there's far more wrong with these people than COVID-19, but we already knew that. The fact is that Donald Trump has resisted wearing a mask since the CDC issued guidelines 7 months ago. His continued refusal to wear masks has created a culture in which wearing a mask is seen as somehow being anti-Trump. It's led to hundreds of cases of people shoving their way into stores while refusing to put on a mask, to protests against mask mandates, and to states and localities refusing to issue mask mandates even when the situation is dire. Even, in fact, as we learned a couple days ago, and I think even earlier, a couple weeks ago, even when the White House actually issues secret guidance to those states saying you really need a mask mandate, which is an amazing dynamic all by itself, if you think about it. All right. It's led to a White House where refusing to wear a mask is a way to show loyalty to Trump, in which Republicans repeatedly appear at events without masks. That's true at Trump rallies. That's true at formal events. It doesn't matter which visitor to the White House or member of the White House staff brought COVID-19 to Donald Trump, because he caused his own disease. Trump is the vector by which the disease spread to himself and his wife, to Hicks, and to any other members of his team who are infected. More than that, Trump is the vector by which COVID-19 has spread to millions of Americans. His continued disdain for wearing masks, safe social distancing, and suspension of large gatherings has directly resulted in widespread illness and absolutely has been the cause for thousands of deaths. Trusting Donald Trump is definitely not good for anyone. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Not that you needed reminding that that was the case. Let's see, a couple other stories that we might want to update on. Let's see. There's, we got that one. And there's Ronna McDaniel. I had begun on the story the other day about what happened in the Breonna Taylor killing grand jury proceedings, and we hadn't had a write-up yet. But now I think we've got one, and perhaps we would take a peek into it. I have a tweet thread here from Emily Galvin Almanza, who lists herself as the founder and CEO of PFJ PFJ USA, which is Partners for Justice. And her thread here points to a Washington Post article on the subject. She's just saying, hey, if you're swept up in this crazy news cycle, you might have missed the fact that the Attorney General in Kentucky admitted the only charge that he submitted to the Breonna Taylor grand jury was wanton endangerment. And this means, as she goes on to explain, that the Attorney General knew that any grand jury was basically going to indict those cops of whatever he put in front of them. So he didn't give them the option to hold anyone accountable for Taylor's death. He lied to the people of the state and to all of you. He walked into a space where he was supposed to be a prosecutor, and he didn't carry out his duty, as that duty would be carried out against any ordinary person. And, she goes on to say, I'm not generally in favor for cages for any human being. I didn't know that about her, but I can believe it. But we are not talking about cages. We're talking about charges. And we're also talking about applying the law equally, not letting police officers continue to be above the law even when they kill. So this is a rather lengthy thread here, and I just wanted to sort of set the stage, really, to pick up on the article, now that there's a write-up of the suspicions about the way the grand jury was handled that were embodied in the story the other day, broken on Twitter, that some of the members of the grand jury were petitioning the court to release the grand jury materials so that everybody could see what they really were and weren't presented with. The Post article here, Kentucky Attorney General says he did not present a case of homicide charges to the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case. He didn't even ask for that. Hannah Knowles and Marissa Iati, I think, are the writers behind the piece. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron did not recommend murder charges to the grand jury, considering evidence against the police officers involved in the death of Breonna Taylor. So that's why they didn't charge it. This, he said Tuesday, amid growing criticism of his handling of the case. Cameron recommended that the jury indict one officer on charges of wanton endangerment for firing bullets that entered neighboring apartments. Yeah, we all know that angle on things. But said the two other officers whose bullets struck Taylor were justified in their acts. Our judgment is that the charge that we could prove at trial beyond a reasonable doubt was for wanton endangerment, Cameron said in an interview Tuesday with local television station WDRB. The statement cast doubt on comments he had made during a news conference last week when he said he walked jurors through every homicide offense and also presented all of the information that was available. Well, he didn't. So there you have it. The grand jury followed Cameron's recommendation, holding no one accountable for Taylor's death, an outcome that outraged her family and activists who have marched for months calling for justice. The decision fueled more demonstrations nationwide last week and calls for transparency in a case that has sowed public distrust in the justice system and become a rallying cry over police killings of black Americans. I mean, no more need for the background here. Just confirmation, at least in verifiable form here in the Washington Post, that, it went pretty much as expected. and the grand jury was never permitted to consider murder charges in the first place. So pretty much what we thought must have happened in order to get to the result that we ended up with. All right. A total shift of gears here. And I mean, of any day that calls, or maybe it does call for this. I don't know. I'm considering changing at the game plan at the last second, but I've been holding on to, and I mean, the Kimberly Guilfoyle story I think is unimportant enough that we could probably just skip it forever. Is there anything else that absolutely must be shoehorned in here? Because I've got a contribution from our friend Darwin that is on a story that it doesn't appear to have anything to do with what's going on day to day right now, and certainly not this particular event, but has been in the back of my mind for quite a while. And I should also acknowledge our friend Judy Vincent here listening live today in Hawaii, having sent me the note that she set her alarm for 2:55 a.m. today so that she can listen to the show live at what is 3 a.m. on very unfortunately for the people in Hawaii. So we appreciate that. But this is a topic she's brought up too. So maybe it's a good time to shift gears and play this. But Darwin, as you know, always covering the military affairs, and brings up a subject, once again, that Judy mentioned to me, that I've been thinking about. I maybe mentioned once or twice on the air in passing. What is going on at Fort Hood? I mentioned, and maybe if you have a really good memory, you might have remembered a late mention at the end of one of the shows. We got to find out what's going on here. There are active duty and recently separated military personnel being murdered at and around Fort Hood at a rather alarming rate, considerably higher than one might expect. And unfortunately, Fort Hood is a pretty big installation, and it's in the middle of Killeen, Texas. And, it's a metropolitan area. They have their murder rates, and, it's expected at some point, but something really strange going on here. And the fact that Darwin finally put it down on tape compels me to turn to that unexpected story right now. You might want at this point to just continue to speculate on the COVID outcome for President Trump. Probably unwise, so we'll turn away from that with good reason. But I bring this up. It's Friday. It's been waiting a while. I meant to do it on Monday when we pre-taped the show, but lots was happening. Lots happening today. But this is one of those things that I just have a feeling will be a story that breaks through real soon, and you'll be ill-prepared if I don't roll Darwin's report on it. So we're going to do it.
All right, folks. We need to talk about Fort Hood. On September 17th, Christopher Brito wrote this article in CBSNews.com. A group of lawmakers unveiled a bipartisan bill named after slain Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen on Wednesday that is designed to help victims report sexual assault and sexual harassment in the military. Speaker Pelosi announced the House would vote on the legislation. The I Am Vanessa Guillen Act was introduced by Democrat Representative Jackie Speer of California and Republican Rep. Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma in a news conference alongside Guillen's family and other congressional members. It aims to allow service members to report sexual harassment and assault to a third party and make sexual harassment a crime within the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now, I just read a small part of that because this is part of a much larger story. If you're in the Texas area and you're part of this military community, you might have just read that the CEO, commanding officer at Fort Hood, was recently replaced. For that, I'll go to military.com to read an update here from Matthew Cox written on September 1st. The Army is replacing the current acting senior commander of Fort Hood and has named a 4-star general to lead a new investigation into the chain of command's actions relating to the murder of Specialist Vanessa Guillen. General Michael Garrett, commander of U.S. Army Forces Command, is directing that Major General John Richardson formally assume duties as Deputy Commanding General for Operations in the acting senior commanding role of Fort Hood on September 2nd, essentially replacing Major General Scott Efland, according to an Army news release. So a lot of shakeup is happening right here at Fort Hood, and we've heard this name here several times now, Vanessa Guillen. And for the bulk of this time, I want to pick up the Stars and Stripes paper that I've actually held onto it since August 28th. And in the paper, it's basically laying it all out, how Fort Hood has seen a rash of suspected homicides and things have gotten out of hand there at Fort Hood. So this particular piece is written by Rose Thayer, and she describes that between March and June, the deaths of 5 soldiers have become suspected homicides, more than the past 4 years combined. At least 2 veterans who had separated from the Army at Fort Hood within the previous 6 months were slain. Additionally, 2 soldiers are alleged to have committed murder. In the previous 4 years, only 2 soldiers' deaths were considered homicides, according to data from Fort Hood Public Affairs Office. Both died in 2017. In addition to the increase in homicides at Fort Hood, the number of violent crimes committed by soldiers at the base this year and since 2015 is alarming. 2020 has been a deadly year, particularly not just for everybody else in the country, but specifically here at Fort Hood. All but 2 of this year's homicides occurred within the city of Killeen. This is where Fort Hood is located, the town just outside the gates of Fort Hood. 1 other occurred in Haker Heights, a small suburb of Killeen. Those deaths received more public scrutiny after international coverage of the disappearance and death of specialist Vanessa Guillen. So the 20-year-old Houston native was bludgeoned to death in an arms room by specialist Aaron Robinson, who with his girlfriend buried her body in a secluded area about 20 miles from the base. I'm sorry I didn't give a trigger warning there, but there's a lot of violent crimes that are happening here, and a lot of suspected foul play. So that's your warning going forward. So they buried her body in a secluded area about 20 miles from the base. He shot himself dead when confronted by local law enforcement after her body was discovered on June 30th. On March 1st, Specialist Shelby Jones, 20, was shot and killed outside a strip club in Killeen. Though a redacted copy of the police investigation shows that 15 people were either involved in the incident or they witnessed it, Bell County grand jury declined to indict the suspect on June 10th. 2 weeks later, De La Cruz Klein and Allred were killed. On March 26, Michael Wardrobe, who separated from the Army in January, was shot and killed. Specialist Jovino Jamal Roy arrested and charged with murder. A fight broke out between the 22-year-old men over an alleged love triangle involving Roy's wife. The Killeen Daily Herald had reported this at the time. Guillen was killed on base the next month. So all this was before this highly publicized case happened. During the 2-month search for her, a tip led investigators to a field in Killeen on June 19th, where police found skeletal remains of another 23-year-old Private Gregory Weddle Morales. Homicide detectives are investigating the case. Mira Montez said, this was an investigator. Wendell Morales went missing in August 2019, just days before he was set to begin out processing from the Army. His unit labeled him a deserter. Okay, yeah, you're a deserter. You're a couple of days away from completing your contract, and you're just gonna, go UA. Doesn't make sense. But the unit labeled him a deserter, a status his mother had to fight to change so she could have her son return home to Oklahoma and buried in a veteran cemetery. So, of course, if you're labeled a deserter, you get other than honorable discharge. You don't get any benefits. Your family will get any of the benefits that you work towards, or that you worked for up until that time. On May 18th, Private First Class Brandon Rosecrans, 27, was shot and killed in Harker Heights, a wealthier, quieter suburb just east of Killeen and Fort Hood. Before Guillen went missing, she told her family she faced sexual harassment on base but was afraid to report it. This, of course, reminds us that Pelosi was going to bring this bill to the floor for a vote. While the family has said Robinson was harassing Guillen, Army investigators maintain that they have not found any evidence to support that allegation. The allegations have led to internal Army reviews of how the base and Guillen's unit implement the Army sexual harassment and assault program, as well as an independent committee formed by McCarthy. Made up of 4 veterans and a former FBI investigator, the committee will look at Fort Hood and the surrounding community to determine whether the command, climate, and the culture, quote, reflect the Army's commitment to safety, respect, inclusiveness, diversity, and freedom from sexual harassment. Its final report is due October 30th. In the last 5 years, 165 soldiers assigned to Fort Hood have died. According to Fort Hood Public Affairs Office, who regularly released this information up until 2018, when suddenly they stopped the practice. The base was an outlier in this level of transparency. In those years, 7 soldiers died by homicide while 6 died in the combat zone. The deaths of 70 soldiers were ruled suicides, and on and off base accidents resulted in the deaths of 60 soldiers. Fort Hood is home to over 36,000 service members, and Killeen has a population close to 150,000. They have a symbiotic relationship. The base generates about $30 billion for the economy in Texas last year alone, according to the state comptroller. Fort Hood employs more than 12,000 civilians as Defense Department personnel, contractors, and employees of its exchanges and commissaries. 2 of Fort Hood's 3 gates that flow into Killeen deposit soldiers directly into an area of local business, barbershops, and tattoo parlors. The 3rd feeds onto a stretch of highway that recently expanded to a full-fledged interstate. As Fort Hood has experienced an increase in homicides, so has Killeen. This year, the city has had 21 homicide victims, surpassing the 16 cases investigated in 2019. Mayor Montes said, that number includes Jones, De La Cruz, and Wedo Morales. Police have closed 8 of this year's cases. This piece in Stars and Stripes is a lot longer, but I pretty much put the highlights out there. It was written by Rose Thayer. She's at thayer.rose@stripes.com or on Twitter at Rose_Lori. I think it's important to bring this sort of thing to the awareness of our listeners. Folks may think that living on base and you're in a safe space there, but the troubles of the regular world can bleed right onto base as well. And it's not just when you're in a combat zone like Iraq or something like that. That there's a lot of effort that's going on by the military. Constantly, I've been hearing about it. They've been preaching to me about it, about sexual assault prevention and reporting and all kinds of programs. And it just seems that amongst the other reasons why these incidents that we have here occurred, the efforts to address these things are being spoken about in the community, but it doesn't look like there's much change, whether if it's sexual assault, whether if it's drinking, whether if it's bullying, other forms of violence. These things happen on base as well. And it may look like a polished cover when we, salute the military and, see the flag and everybody's polished or uniform is squared away. But there's a lot of hurt that's going on internally that I appreciate opportunities like this to sort of expose or at least bring to light. So if you have a service member in your family or friends, ask them about it and ask them to be candid about it. And it'll make us all the better for it. So thanks for listening. This is Darwin _Darko on Twitter. And back to you, David.
All right. I'll take it back. Thanks, Darwin. I appreciate you bringing us up to date on that one. I feel like it's a long neglected story, and although it's a big shift away from the story of the day, there's no more to report for you on the story of the day. We'll just have to, we'll see what happens, I guess, to use Trump's favorite line on things like that. This gives me a few more minutes to try and, I guess, shoehorn in a little bit of another story that also feels like it's been laying around for a while, although, well, actually, now that I think about it, perhaps this one we save for later on. But another, I guess maybe to recap here, I was gonna head down the Rudy Giuliani and Ukraine story again, but it occurs to me that the story I actually picked out for discussion is actually considerably older than I thought. It's actually from November of last year, but it was an interesting look. The headline intrigued me. Why Giuliani singled out the 2 Ukrainian oligarchs that he worked with to help him look for dirt. But just a good reminder. But the fact that it popped up again in my feed recently makes me wonder whether there's going to be any advancing of the ball on the Ukraine story or some Giuliani bombshell that we might otherwise have forgotten about. That might have been something that perhaps Trump even wanted to roll out as his own October surprise groundwork, now, I guess, upended by the black swan event of his own coronavirus infection. But I guess that does give us at least the opportunity to say, as I mentioned when we were discussing the idea of using delaying tactics, even if they were just delays and not prevention, with the Amy Coney Barrett nomination fight, is that, like I said, you never know what's going to pop up in this incredible, stupid situation we find ourselves in. And we thought we were really stretching it when it came to Mike Caputo leaving maybe government with head and neck cancer plus a psychotic incident of some kind. And then Brad Parscale's hospitalization, as well as, of course, the charges that he might have been stealing millions of dollars from the campaign. And I guess we thought we were done with the black swans for the week, and then we throw in a positive COVID diagnosis for the president and his wife, plus other top aides and a list of the whole inner circle having been exposed. And again, the question of whether or not, and we ought to press this point, and a couple of people did pick up on it in the first couple hours after the initial reports. The chain of contacts goes to Judge Barrett herself, to the chief of staff at the White House. Now she's made the rounds meeting with every one of the senators. There really is like actual medical basis to call for closing down the operations of the Senate, thereby, what do you know, delaying the activity on the nomination, which I assume Republicans will only reject, but that means going into an election cycle not only with putting more vulnerable Republicans on the hot seat, but putting them on the hot seat now also positive for COVID-19 and campaigning for re-election on having handled the pandemic along with the president who has COVID-19. It could have some really serious electoral impact. So I guess we won't have time to read through it, of course, but I'll remind you again of the remarkable compilation put together by William Salatin in Slate back in early August on the, as he puts it, the blow-by-blow account of how the president killed thousands of Americans and made the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States unlike anywhere else in the world. It's a very damning and very long read, but it might make interesting reading for the early part of the weekend if you want to put yourself in the right mood for waiting for further news on how the president's doing. I thought I recommended it the other day. I recommend it to you again. Good reading for the weekend. And I will also just remind you of, I had to go back and dig it up, back on May 18th of this year, of course, the tweeted report from press pool activity at one of the press conferences, Yamiche Alcindor and her now we would say infamous tweet. Wow, President Trump just said he's taking hydroxychloroquine. So I wonder, obviously people must have thought of that by now, but is this the end of the myth of hydroxychloroquine as a prophylactic, or are they just going to say, well, he stopped taking it because of stupid pressure from idiot liberals, and this is your fault? Now, that'll be the Democrats gave him COVID because they pressured him out of continuing to take hydroxychloroquine. I don't know how long he thought he was going to take it. I don't know if he was ever taking it. He might have been lying when he said it, but there you have it. So just, so much for the idea that his taking hydroxychloroquine would be what kept him safe. I guess it just doesn't work, but masks probably do. And once again, he backed the wrong horse on that one. That was, by the way, 120 or so thousand deaths ago. But he just kept marching on, we'll say, to the beat of his own drum, to put a really nice spin on it. And, now that we're up at 213,000 deaths, His name is in the hat. We'll see whether it gets picked out over the next 40 days or so. That's, after all, how long it took Herman Cain to succumb to the virus. I'm not saying that it will happen the same way for the president, not even hoping necessarily, because you're not supposed to hope that it'll happen the same way for the president. But the election will take place first. So I guess for those of you looking for a message of a little bit of best of both worlds heading into the weekend, those of you torn between hoping that the president survives, either because you're a good person or because you want to have him live to see the end of his political career presented to him in humiliating fashion, and torn between that and, on the other hand, watching him experience the karmic effects of having killed so many other people with his doubts and disbeliefs about the science of COVID-19. Well, 40 days puts us after the election, so he could indeed survive to suffer that humiliation and then check out forever. And, might not be... look, I won't put a value on it. I'll only say we'll see what happens. It is what it is. And I'll tell you what else is what it is. It's the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next. Hey,
from Daily Coos Radio on netrootsradio.com.
It's one of the worst promos I could possibly hand you.
You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, look, what do you think they'll be talking about on the show? Well, we know this, starting off at this Bistro Cafe section. No amount of ventilation is good enough in an indoor setting to mitigate risk or transmission, like what happened during the debate and at Trump's super spreader rallies. So fingers crossed for everybody else who could be infected, Joe Biden included.